And last Friday, the Supreme Court quashed the National Judicial Appointments Commission set up by the government for appointment of judges, calling it unconstitutional and even void. The ruling sparked a judiciary versus legislature debate nationwide and threw up several questions. Does the Supreme Court verdict damage the parliament's sovereignty? Does the government trying to compromise the idea of judicial independence in India? And has there been an abuse of power by the Supreme Court over decades now?
That's right, our sister channel Times now brought the biggest spokespersons of both sides under one roof, the judiciary and the legislature on the same stage for a rare public debate. Sparks flew thick and fast when Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, former CJI Justice Lodha, former Attorney General Soli, Sorabjee and senior advocate Rajeev Dhawan argued their best in support and against the Supreme Court ruling. What serves the people of India best, NJAC or the Collegium? The national debate, moderated by Times Now and 18 Hours editor-in-chief Arnab Goswami. That's our top story on Business Tonight.
What happens if 6 people, there's a tie? In the third judge's case, 1998, when the Supreme Court created a collegium of 5 judges to appoint judges of the Supreme Court, one of the conditions they mentioned was, what if there are 2 views about a candidate? Should he be appointed? Because once a dubious person is appointed, then he's there till ever. If 1 out of 5 dissents, it's a dissent. But if 2 have an objection, then it's more than a dissent. The person can be ignored. So just as in a collegium of 5, if 2 people object, the name has to be dropped, and that's a convention which has been followed till date. The same convention is statutorily incorporated in this in the law itself. If 2 out of the 6 members say somebody is very controversial, let's keep him out. Therefore, if there are 2 views on a person, let's not have him as a judge. How is that a structural defect in the judgment?
Anyone who knows the Constitution, anyone who understands the constitutional functioning, Constitution has provided elected representatives of people to make law. They have been empowered to make law within the limits that Constitution provides. They are elected representatives. But at the same time, India has not followed a US model where large number of judges are elected. Now about American judges, what people say? What they say is they're hardworking, they're intelligent, but he was a lawyer once he knew a politician. So, do you want a judiciary where people say, looking at the judge, that he was a lawyer once he knew a politician? Now, that job, making of laws, is of the parliament. But what the law is the domain of the judiciary.
The court can say, yes, the NJAC is ultra-virus, but shouldn't it be the prerogative of the parliament to put in place an alternative law? Did you therefore wade into the territory of the legislature?
वो कहते हैं अरुण जेटली साहब that what is best for India is to be decided by the legislature. Who says so? The Constitution doesn't. जब आप preventive detention में जाएंगे तो आप कहाँ जाएंगे? पार्लियामेंट के पास. उन्होंने तो लॉ पास किया है. Where will you go? You'll go to the judiciary. So understand this. Our Constitution has 2 trusteeships. The trusteeship of the political texts, which belong to politicians. The trusteeship of the judicial texts, which belong to the judiciary. Can you imagine a democracy without the justice texts? Answer, no. Can you imagine a democracy without the rule of law? Answer, no. It is because the judiciary is there, the citizens of this country say, we have an elected democracy with politicians, but at the same time, politicians are not a law unto themselves. NJAC is not what they are talking about, this general stuff. There are design faults in the NJAC. And what Mr. Jaitley is saying, and Mr. Soli Sorabjee is saying, absolutely wrong.
Rajiv lives in a fictional world. He says, where would you go if you were detained? On this dais, I am the only one who suffered a detention. And
जेटली साहब बहुत साल हो गए.
Therefore,
Okay,
I'm just
yeah, बदल
trying to
गया.
correct your sense of history. I'm the only one who suffered a detention. I followed Rajeev Dhawan's advice and went to courts. And the courts told me the doors are closed for you. So much for your... So you've forgotten the emergency.
Emergency की बात कर रहे हो?
Okay.
So
We
you-
will only make a request out here. If we can keep it completely on the subjects at hand rather than on a personal attack, I think our audience would far more appreciate it. Sir.
Now this whole argument is based on two premises. A constitutional court has to base the interpretation of the constitution on a constitutional principle. Politicians are bad, so let's hijack the constitutional power.
Nobody said.
This is no constitutional provision. There is no constitutional provision anywhere in the world that democratic institutions have to be saved from the elected. And the elected are per se bad. Now, if this example applies the other way around, you go to parliamentarians through dalals and they don't listen to you, so let's hijack the power. Now, let me, Rajeev.
Say that, Mr. Jaitley.
Let me answer.
I didn't mention hijack even once.
No, I'm using, that's the answer. Because if we lumpenize the argument to this level,
It is not
then
lumpen.
somebody else will come up and say, oh, there are 3 crore cases pending in courts, the judges are not doing their power, and therefore they are not doing their job, so let somebody exercise this power. I think such an argument, either for the legislature or the judiciary is completely destructive of the Constitution. The Supreme Court says basic structure has to be protected from the legislature. The basic structure also has to be protected from the judiciary, and separation of powers is a part of that basic.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.